Welcome to this module titled Assess Every Student, Every Time, as designed and produced by the Region 11 Education Service Center. In this course, you'll learn different ways to assess every student, select formative assessments to maximize learning and engagement, and practice delivery of instructions to minimize off-task behavior. For today's presentation, you'll need a copy of Teach Like a Champion 2.0 by Doug Lemov, as well as accessing links to videos that are associated with this book. At the conclusion of this course, you'll have an opportunity to demonstrate your understanding of the stated learning objective by participating in a demonstration lab that's sponsored by Region 11 Certification Team. During the mini-lesson, you'll use some of the strategy categories listed in the rubric to give clear directions with efficient transitions. So let's get comfortable, get your resources, and start learning together. There are numerous ways to check for student understanding and increase engagement. At this time, pause the video and read about 4 specific tasks of checking for understanding on pages 24 to 26 in the book Teach Like a Champion 2.0. We will begin with polls, the technique Show Me, and checks for understanding. At this time, please pause the video and read pages 47 to 51 in Teach Like a Champion 2.0. We will now begin to delve deeper into ways that you can assess every student every time. Specifically, we'll focus on how to poll, randomize, break it down, roll back an answer, and ask universal prompts that push students to elaborate. To help you prepare for planning your mini-lesson, here are some questions to consider when planning to incorporate the Show Me technique. These questions are: what questions will I have students answer? What target answers am I looking for from the students? And what are the likely wrong answers? Once you've identified those, you'll want to consider whether you will use the SLATE or hand signals framework. If you're wanting to use the SLATE version of Show Me, here are some questions you'll want to plan for prior to the lesson. And if you're wanting to use a hand signal version of Show Me, here are the questions you'll want to plan for prior to the lesson. Now that you have a clear understanding of the Show Me technique, see it in action by clicking on the pop-up on this screen. As you watch, take note of how the teacher makes use of cues to get students to participate as efficiently as possible. The next technique, the cold call, entails calling on students regardless of whether or not they've raised their hands. It's used to check for understanding, maintaining an expectation that everyone participates and is engaged, manages pacing, and increases the think and participation ratios. Hit pause at this time and read pages 249 to 262 to get a better understanding of what it is and the 4 fundamentals of the cold call technique. The first key to successful cold calling is making certain you're keeping the process positive. Cold calls should never be used as a gotcha moment or to punish a student. The second key to successful cold calling is making certain you're keeping the process predictable. Cold calls are used often, early, and reliably, and teachers are transparent about why and how they're used. Students will be able to anticipate cold calls and be engaged in the class even before you begin using the process. The third key to successful cold calling is making certain that it's a systematic process. By calling on several students from around the room, you ensure that students don't think you're singling out individuals, but that all students are eligible to showcase their learning. In addition, take extra care to make certain you're not cold calling based on student behavior. For example, do not cold call a student because you think they look like they may not be paying attention. A solution to this may be calling on a student while your back is turned, or even using a name randomizer. The final key to successful cold calling is making certain you unbundle the questions you want to ask. By breaking the question into smaller sub-questions, you increase the student participation ratio and help build peer-to-peer accountability because students will need to listen to the responses of others in case they're called on next. Now that you've had time to learn about the cold call technique, see it in action by clicking on the pop-up on the screen to watch a teacher using cold call. As you watch, consider how keeping track of students' responses could help inform the teacher of next steps for instruction. So one of the most difficult times to recapture learning is immediately after a student provides either an incorrect or insufficient answer. At this time, you'll need to hit pause on the video to read about different ways to break it down, to turn mistakes into teachable moments on pages 268 to 273 in the book Teach Like a Champion 2.0. Instead of simply saying a student is wrong, consider providing examples of what you're looking for from the student to prompt their recall. For example, when asking to define a noun, provide examples of nouns to help the student associate ideas. You can also give context so that they can access their long-term memory and make connections to their current learning. Two more ways to break it down are providing a rule and cueing. When providing a rule, ask questions that will trigger their recall without necessarily giving them the full rule. Or provide a cue to a missing step, or a step that will get them thinking how to get to the answer. Rolling back and narrowing or eliminating false choices are the two final ways to break it down. Read the examples from the slide to see how it's done. The next technique, stretch it, is used when we want to respond to right answers with more questions. This will accomplish three things. Pushing student thinking deeper will be what's expected by both the teacher and students. Continuous learning occurs and sends a message that we can always learn more. Also, growth mindset is reinforced by rewarding success with additional challenges. Hit pause at this time and read pages 108 to 116 to learn how to best implement the stretch it technique. Ask how or why to get students to delve deeper in their thinking. For example, the teacher asks, "How far is it between Dallas and Fort Worth?" 190 miles. "How'd you get that?" "Well, I measured inches on the map and added 50 plus 50 plus 50 plus 40. Get students to stretch their thinking by asking for another way to answer. For example, the teacher could ask, "How'd you get that answer?" "By adding 50 plus 50 plus 50 plus 40. Is there a simpler way than adding 4 times? As you learn from your reading, you can ask for a better word or a more precise expression for students to expand their responses. For example, "Why did the main character scream, Susie?" "She screamed because the coffee she spilled was hot." Can you use another word that shows how hot? Maybe a vocabulary word? "Oh, she screamed because the coffee was scalding as it hit her lap." Asking for evidence is a sure way to get students ready for justifying answers. Here we have an example. "How would you describe Romeo's feelings for Rosalind?" "He loved her." "What evidence do you have that he loved her? Can you tell us what lines suggest that he loves her?" Another technique for stretching is integrating another related skill to the questioning. Pause and read the example on this slide. The final suggestion for stretching it is asking students to apply the same skill in a new scenario. Our example here prompts a student to relate the setting of a play to a different form of media. Now that you've read about the Stretch It technique and seen some examples, pause the video and watch the technique in action by clicking on the pop-up that shows up on the screen. As you watch, practice identifying which aspect of the Stretch It technique the teacher uses and evaluate the effect the technique has on the overall level of academic discourse. Congratulations, you've finished the learning required for this course. You'll have an opportunity to demonstrate your understanding of the stated learning objective by participating in a demonstration lab that's sponsored by Regional 11 certification team. During your mini lesson, you'll introduce a new concept or skill and assess the student's learning by using 1 to 3 of the strategy categories listed on the rubric here. The following slides contain a few helpful tips as you prepare for your mini lesson. Start off by spending about 3 minutes introducing a new concept or skill. During planning, you'll want to determine which areas or concepts that your students might have difficulty with, or which concepts they must master before moving on to another concept or skill. Spend a few minutes assessing student learning by selecting one of the techniques learned in this module. Remember to establish student expectations with their responses. You can continue on with your lesson. Then provide another opportunity to assess your students using a different technique. Remember to close your lesson by summarizing the learning and relaying the significance of the content. Thank you for your work on this module titled Assessing Every Student Every Time. Good luck and feel free to review this at any time as you prepare for your upcoming mini lesson. Today's material referenced the book Teach Like a Champion and used downloaded images from Pixabay.